Welcome to the It's Our Life's Work podcast, brought to you by Opus Vitae Construction here in Portland, Oregon.
Okay, so welcome to the very first podcast of the It's Our Life's Work podcast. This is, the start of hopefully many that will be, we're hopefully trying to get out one a month, basically, from here moving forward. And, this is a conversation about how we started this thing, the Opus Vitae construction project, I like to call it. And the interesting thing is that we all have very different backgrounds. And my background has been in construction since high school, essentially. And it's pretty much all I've known and love. And it's, started off with the guy that, was working part-time through high school or part of high school on a construction site, learning the ropes as an apprentice or grunt, as you will, and, being yelled at on the regular and, all that fun stuff to, ultimately, working my way through all the ranks and having my own business here and there on a very small scale. And then ultimately starting this thing at the right time in my career when I was finally wise enough, mature enough, and knew that I couldn't do it myself. And so that's where you two come in.
For the mature enough part?
Yes, for the maturity component and the wise part.
Do we get to be the grunts now?
No, not at all.
No, I had an interesting and different experience from you in that I went to college to get a biology degree, thinking I might be a doctor, and then went to graduate school and got a master's degree. And then I went into construction from having been in pastoral ministry, which is a very collegial kind of a thing where everyone works together. And so when I got a first construction job, I got in trouble for hanging around with the all the bigwigs because I just wanted to listen and learn on what was going on. And I found out pretty quickly what you're talking about with grunts. They're like, young man, get back to what you need to be doing, cleaning up and this and that.
Right.
And
yeah.
I realized it was a very different world that I was entering. So I did that much later in my life than you did.
For sure. But, I think that what you bring to this, though, that's really critical, not being from construction from, infancy, is that you bring a different perspective to it. Yeah. And that's mostly about caring for people through the entire process. Yeah. Because, oftentimes, what we're dealing with are people, clients, design professionals, subcontractors, other employees, whatever the case may be. And it's like construction is 25% of what we do. Interacting with all these other people is the bigger piece, for sure.
Well, and that's true. And that's, I think, why we reached out to Christine at the very beginning anyway, was because you bring an entirely different something. And we knew we needed to consult with you about how to get this thing started. Tell us a little bit about how we roped you into this.
Compelling friendship. I think, so my background has largely been in helping startup companies from when they initially get their funding until they're ready to kind of grow and be on their own. And Paul and I have been friends for a few years, and he came with this harebrained idea that he and this other person that he knew were going to start their own business. And upon talking to both of you, I realized you didn't know a lot about the running of the business. You had a good idea for what you wanted to do and how to do that out in the real world. And it was very much, probably a COVID decision. I think people make COVID decisions. I think there were a lot of people who made dramatic life changes at the time. And I, after 20 something years in corporate, the corporate worlds, was like, how about construction? This sounds fun.
Sounds easy and fun. Right?
Yeah, right? That was probably the last time I ever thought construction was easy in that moment. Yeah. But I think, or I know that my background in HR and finance and how those two couple together would be the backbone of what you guys didn't know, which was everything unrelated to construction.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the magic for me is the fact that Paul and I can do the stuff that we do best because you're doing all the stuff that you do best, and that there's very little overlap, which is really great. I've been witness to too many scenarios where there's lots of overlap and everybody thinks that they're the best at it and it becomes this kind of mess. And we're like, no, we're not good at that.
Yeah.
You're great at it. We know what we're good at, and that's what we'll focus on. And that's been very, I think, instrumental in our success thus far.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a certain perspective at one point where I thought you might be like the poster child of Opus Vitae construction, but you quickly dashed that one because you just love to work behind the scenes and be the engine that makes the thing work. And so
Almost like a puppet master, maybe?
maybe a little bit. So I would guess that we won't see you quite as much on the podcast as we will be here because you would love to recede to the back patio.
I offered to just set up the microphones and walk out of the room, but there was already somebody here to do that. So short
Yeah, but
story.
after the first one, then you're going to be like, oh, no, that was easy. That was fun. We're going to do it again. So, yeah, we're going to need you to come back from time to time.
From time to time.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you're just far too critical to what's happening here to not be here at the beginning. And so hearing your voice and a little bit of your insight about why we were doing what we were doing is going to be very important today.
Yeah.
But one question I have for you, Christine, is that you saw something about what we were talking about doing that seemed different and compelling to you. Do you know exactly what that was? Or
I think there's probably a list of things that felt different from the get-go, but I would say that one of my professional passions has been to be a force in companies to treat people differently. And in our very first conversation that we had, we talked about how people in the field are treated, both, of owners of company and how they treat the people in the organization, how homeowners treat the people who show up on job sites, how trades treat each other, the materials that we use on job sites and how that might impact people's health. And I think as somebody who's helped employ hundreds upon hundreds of people and really been a part of looking at that person as just kind of a cog in the wheel of a company, and then hearing you guys talk about how your passion and one of the guiding forces for you was to really care for the people and create relationship. And, I think it's cliche to say like we're all family because we're not all family, but we can all love each other well and we can all care for each other well. And we
hold
can
on a second.
consider.
So you love me?
I do.
Saying. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Good. All right.
if this is
Okay.
one time and I only have to stay here one time, we'll see how it goes from there.
I liked how you worked that in that way.
Yeah,
You got
yeah.
the commendation right there. Great.
We may need to introduce our audience to your 20% at some point, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
No, we'll get to that point.
Yeah. So I think like it just at its root, like there was a very early conversation about treating people really well. And I think that all three of us shared like an instant light bulb moment of like, oh, let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
That will be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll speak for myself here, but treating people well is like key to everything, right? It's like the football team that does all the fundamentals properly
Like
wins
the
the game.
49ers.
Like the 49ers will likely do.
Yeah.
But like the trick plays are fun and flashy and stuff, but they don't win games, right? It's the fundamentals that win games. And to me, like treating people well and caring for everybody that we interact with is that fundamental that gets us to the Super Bowl victory.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting right now for us as a company is we're trying to do very high performance building and high quality and have soft skills with our clients and things like that. But when we try to add people to our team, it's the most difficult thing in the world for those same reasons. And so when we find the right people and bring them onto our team, it can't feel just like they're a cog in the system like you're talking about. There has to be a very personal element to it where they feel like they're connected to everything that the organization is doing. And so that has to start from the ground up.
It does. And they have to feel that the organization's always there to support them, right? There's nothing worse than to be an employee at a company and you feel like nobody even cares or notices that you're there and that you really don't make a difference. And like for us, like our people can never be replaced. And you hear me say this from time to time that, we can find somebody else to do what they do, but we can never find a replacement for that person. And so it's far better for us to keep those people close to us than to turn them away just thinking that we'll just replace it with somebody else. It's impossible.
That's right.
Every one of our people, there's not an equal person out there that would replace them.
Mm-hmm.
There's somebody that could maybe do their job but not replace them.
Yeah.
And they're just special people. They really are special, all of us.
Well, all of that, what you're saying and what you said, Christine, revolve around the name that we chose for our company. Do you have any reflections, Christine, on like how we came to that, what that process felt like for you?
It was terrible. Naming a company is terrible. It is a terrible path. Oh man. No, I don't know. I was reminiscing the other day. Somebody asked how we came up with the name, and I will defer to both of you to talk. The two questions I get are, how did you come up with the name, and how do you say it?
Of course.
Right.
And then sometimes, how do you now spell it?
Yeah.
That goes in that succession. But I will let you guys talk about that. I'll defer. But what was interesting is we recently moved, and I found the giant Post-it note where we had all of the names that we eventually rejected. And OVC wasn't even on there. Like, it was not, like, it came out of absolutely nowhere in some levels. But the ones, like, I was so glad we didn't name it after any of us.
Yes.
We can get to that. I was really grateful for that. I was really glad it wasn't some Oregon... Sorry. Some like Oregon name, like Y East Construct. That might be omit that. Is that a construction company in town? I don't know. But it was interesting to read the ones that we had rejected. I was like, well, that was quite a list. It was a long list.
Was it really?
It was a
I think
very
I have
long
selective
list.
memory. I don't remember.
It
being
was
like you did.
I remember it being, and you're right. Like, what we came up with was it had nothing to do with what we started with, right?
Not at all.
But I'm really glad that we came up with what we did, because it's a unique name, and it's a name that we get asked about a lot, or people will see our name on our vehicles around town, and they're like, a construction company with Latin? I've got to know more about that. And I think that ultimately, by probably anything more than, or for the most part, was just like sheer luck. We came up with this thing that was really special. But backing into that, it means a lot to us, right? Ultimately, it means our life's work.
Yeah.
And that's what this is. This is our life's work. Like, there's nothing, there's nothing that we do that I think has a bigger impact on our life than our work. And what we do in our life with our life's work, like, moves outward from us, right, in waves. And does it help people, or does it hurt people? And I like to think that what we're doing helps people, and it just moves outward from us and keeps helping, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I was also really glad that we didn't end up with a name that was centered around who we are, our names, or that sort of thing. One of the values I remember talking about those early meetings was having it, what we're doing, what we're starting, last after we're not doing it anymore. And having a name that allows that to happen was a big part of it. The other thing that was interesting as I look at the logo sitting by the table by us here is that we had these images that were part of what we were interested in, that was this kind of tree or a mother tree image, and both leaves, which represent the growth of a tree, and the roots, which are everything that's supporting not only the tree, but in a bigger way, everything that's around that tree, other trees, and the ecosystem. And this deep desire on all our parts to not just be about ourselves, but to be an integrating, connecting force in the industry and among industries. So in the design world, in the trades, with our clients, to have it be a very unifying, stabilizing force. And I'm really excited about the union of both the name and the image that we chose for those reasons.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it was neat. I remember, all the different selections and the back and forth. And of course, when you come up with one, it was like, you're trying to sell it to everybody. Like, oh no, this is the name. This is the good name. But I love what we came up with, and it's really special. And our life's work is it's a big deal. And
it's an idea of, if you're talking about in terms of Simon Sinek's book, Infinite or Finite Games, we're talking about an infinite game, something that we don't see having an end. We see it being a process. We're shooting toward things, but not, we're trying to win at the end of 60 minutes.
Right.
We're trying to advance some principles, some core values and things of that nature in a way that continues to perpetuate over time when you bring in people who see it, catch that vision, and want to continue it. And that's very exciting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always, people will be like, well, who's your competition? What are they doing? What's going on out there? And I'm like, I don't care. We're our own competition. We compete with ourselves to just get better and better and better and better and better. And when the three of us are no longer in the company because we've retired out, the next three majority owners will be taking it to another level. And they'll be bringing the things from their past to move this thing forward beyond what we could do. And, I could hope that, upon my deathbed, I'm able to look over and here's this shining thing of Opus Vitae construction, and it's doing even more amazing things. And it will be wonderful to know that like we were here and we were the thing that started that.
Yep.
So it's Vitae?
Yeah.
Are you sure it's not Vitae?
It's Vitae. It's Tuesday? Yeah, it's Vitae.
Oh, got it.
Out, they're both right.
Right.
Vitae or Vitae.
So you'll probably hear Kevin say our name differently than me at different times.
And I will call it OVC because I'm most comfortable there.
Love it.
But it's also interesting that it kind of ties well into the way we build homes.
Yeah.
Right? It's like we care about what's on the inside as much as we care about what's on the outside.
Right.
Yeah.
What's behind the walls is equally as important as to what's in front of the wall that we
Right.
can see and interact with. And that's a good way to put that.
And that's been a bit of a metamorphosis, I would say, that we just discover as we go along, wouldn't you? It's not the commitment is new to caring what's behind the wall, but the depth of understanding of how those impacts are felt
Oh, for
all
sure.
the way through.
I've talked about this quite a little bit, but early in my career, I was like, hey, I'm going to discover the perfect wall assembly. Like it's out there. I'm going to discover it. And then I'm just going to do it every single time. And then like it's on autopilot. We don't have to worry.
Right.
Like this is the perfect thing. Like can do everything. And only in wisdom do you realize that there is no perfect wall assembly. There's principles and fundamentals that go into a perfect wall assembly, but it depends. It depends on every single project. Christine's smiling right now because I use the word depends a lot because it's so applicable to what we do.
Yeah.
It depends, right? A house that fits in this neighborhood that has this amount of wind hitting it from this side should be different than the one that sits over here that's completely sheltered from the wind, right? Or the views are different, or the heights of the house, or like there's so many things that go into why microclimates, all that stuff, why we would choose to construct something in a certain way. And it's very site specific and owner specific, climate specific, microclimate specific. There's like just so many things that have to be taken into account. And so there is no perfect wall assembly. And so I came to realize that. And it's like, it's not the wall assembly I'm looking for. It's the principles, the guiding principles I'm looking for that will allow me to help create the perfect wall assembly for each individual situation.
Yeah. I remember that conversation that you and I carried on because you'd been having it for a long time yourself. And then we were carrying it on. And then we went to the passive house training on the East Coast. And we thought we had this perfect wall assembly. Remember that?
Yes.
And then we got there and we read all these passive house principles and things like that. And then as the training was going on, it was like progressively getting dismantled. And we were having to collect ourselves again and think about like, okay, if this wasn't the perfect wall assembly, what is? And then we get back and realize, like you're saying, that there isn't a perfect wall assembly that's carte blanche, one wall assembly. But then, and so for a little while there, for example, we were also married to the ideas of passive house principles and that specific brand of high performance buildings. And then you started out on this journey of biological building, and you're like, time out. There's even more to consider, right? So we're just constantly in this flow of trying to figure out how to do and think through the things that we're trying to build better, because there's a depth to it that's pretty shocking.
There's a crazy depth to it. There really is. And, we don't know all that we don't know, but we know a lot. And all we can do is our best with what we know. But we're constantly seeking that out. Constantly.
Well, that was what I was going to add, is that I think everybody in our organization has an innate curiosity.
Yeah.
So we don't take just an answer as the answer. Like we ask why, we ask how, we ask what if, and that propels us to always be discovering and educating ourselves. And, you have your Kevin's cart of fun. Is that what we call it?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That has, all these materials and building things.
That's the technical.
Stuff.
That's the
Right,
technical
yeah.
term right there.
Also, I learned what a wall assembly was in the last 2 years. You have that cart, and some of those materials you've had experience with, others you've discovered along the way, and you hope that we get to have experience with them soon. And I think like that cart is a great example of what we're constantly doing at Opus, of looking for things that will build great, buildings and will last for forever and, be as durable as they can possibly be and be healthy. And, but that's through curiosity, like just
Right.
this like innate curiosity, and we hire for it. Like we want it in our team. We have our monthly meeting with our team. Like we probe at curiosity, like why this, why that, and ask a lot of questions, because I think at least what I've learned, like a lot of building principles have been done for a really long time in the same way without a lot of consideration as to why.
Right.
And when you just start to ask why, like you can peel it back differently and maybe learn a new way.
Oh, for sure. The interesting thing about when you ask the question why, most often you get well, that's the way we've been doing it. Or, well, that's the way I was taught. It's like, but haven't you ever questioned or said, hey, I think there's a different way and a better way, right? And there's so many ways to approach every problem. And that's what's fascinating for me and exciting, right? I've been doing this a long time. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've built a lot of things. My ego has been stroked enough. And now for me, it's fun to like try and figure out how do we solve for this problem? How do we solve for this problem? The directive is we need a high performing, thermally comfortable home. And we don't want to use styrofoam. How do we do that? And it's like, that's a tough one.
Yes.
But we can figure it out. And that's the fun for me, is like figuring it out, working with architects or other carpenters on our team or whatever, trying to figure out, okay, well, if we're going to do this, how are we going to do that to keep the water out and stuff? I mean, like here in the Northwest, it's all about keeping the water out. We're a zone 4 marine environment here, so it's really no different than being at the coast, other than we don't have salt water. So when you think about that, everything that we do and how we construct a house is just like over the top, trying to keep water out, but knowing that it's going to get in, so when it does, it needs to have a path out, whether it's drying it inside or rain screen or some sort of scenario to move that water and moisture away from the house. And it's fascinating to think about that, because so much of my career was like, no, you keep it out with caulking and stuff, and like you just keep it out. But that's kind of a fool's errand, because it's going to get in. Like Mother Nature is like, you can't keep her from doing what she wants to do, which is she wants to get water into that assembly. And so when it does, you just have a path outward for it. And that's kind of the secret to it all. But it's tricky. It's tricky because every house has new and challenging details that you have to figure out. How do we keep water out? But if it gets in, how does it get out?
Yep. And with that complexity that you're talking about, it means that there's an inherent difficulty in trying to find the right people to work with.
It's super critical to have the right people here. And if it takes longer to find that right person, then it takes longer, because like we've got this like thing that's so perfect, I think, and we don't want to do anything to mess it up, right? We don't want to bring somebody in that's going to be counter to those things, or have 75% of the skills that we want or missing the 25%, but that 25% is critical. And then they have to be able to get along well with our team, right? Because our team gets along really well. It just does. I mean, does that mean that there isn't, an occasional little hiccup? Of course not. But by and large, like we all like each other and we like to work together. I think that's really important.
I will correct you on the it just does, though, because I don't think it just does. I think it happens through a lot of work. We're, we have a list of soft skills, and we've trained to those soft skills. We talk about those soft skills. We affirm the behaviors that we want to see. We call out the ones that are not great, and I think, we are a company I think people can grow into. It's very different. It's different than any other company I've ever been with, so much so that sometimes I get uncomfortable and try to cover my eyes. And part of that is just the harsh reality of, I think the three of us are pretty blunt within the workforce of like, that doesn't make sense. Tell me more, or tell me why. We get back to why a lot. But we have people on our team who don't necessarily have a full fleshing out of those soft skills that we want. But again, back to the relationship part and caring for them, we fully believe that they can attain them through work. And we partner with them and they partner with each other. I think that's the fun thing that I like to see on our job sites is this this great desire to train one another on the things that we may be lacking. Myself too, like, you know, I joke a lot about my inability to measure. When I was at one of the job sites the other day, one of the guys was holding his measuring tape. He's like, "You want a lesson?" I'm like, "Fine, try again," you know, but like they naturally have this desire to teach one another, and it extends into those soft skills of like, that didn't feel good. You know, that was crummy or whatever. Like, we're not perfect by any means. Our team is not perfect, but our desire is to treat each other really well. And I think that in turn, people grow with it.
I would affirm what you're saying, Christine, especially the part about we're not perfect. One of the things that has been, I would guess, most challenging for us is to build a relationship together because we're very different people.
We are? Oh my gosh.
This is the way the conversation usually goes.
Who told you?
Right.
Exactly.
But like you and I knew each other and Christine and I knew each other, but we hadn't worked together. And that the soft skills that we're talking about asking or even demanding of our team only happen if we're practicing them ourselves. And that's definitely been a growing edge for us. As
Oh
we tried
man,
to
that
figure out how to
first
do it.
year,
Yeah.
it was a ride
Yeah.
for all of us.
Really? It
Yeah.
seemed pretty vanilla to me. But.
You would like to spice it up some more? I don't know that I want that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like our backgrounds of like how you got things done in business.
Yeah.
Like we all three of us, like I won't identify whom. Some people like to work around because working around people helped them thrive at the organizations they'd been at before. Other people just like to force things through because forcing things through got what you wanted done. It's like, and those things with having three founders created quite the dichotomy
Yeah.
that we had to grow through. And our team experienced it. Like they knew that we were not always on the same page in that first year and they could find wobble amongst us and we found it, you know, and it was, I look back at that time and I kind of giggle because I think what we have now is so much fun, but I don't know that it would have been as fun as it is now if we hadn't firmed up the foundation in that first year and like really identified the parts that didn't work and called it out with one another and then reinforced. Because I do think, I think we've got a tremendous foundation to build this thing on top of.
Yeah, we do.
I agree. And without that relational work that we'd done at the beginning, we wouldn't be able to talk about or model that with the people on our team. And it really, for it to work well the way we want it to, I think, everyone on our team needs to be able to feel confident to come to us if they don't feel like we're playing the part that we need to or carrying ourselves the way that we need to. In fact, one of our carpenters did that with me in a very gracious way, pulled me aside to coffee and said, I don't feel like you've been leading in this particular way. And that was exactly what we needed. Like, that's the kind of relationship that we beg from people, right? Please help us understand. This company is not just our company. This is your company. Help us understand if this isn't going well. And we have to trust that the people that we're working with are hearing that and not just hearing it, but saying, okay, this is a safe enough place for me to practice those things. So I was very grateful when the carpenter pulled me aside that way.
Yeah. And, you know, you spoke about, you know, like safe, right? And it's true. It's, you know, I've been around and been part of other organizations that they would say stuff like, yeah, no, tell me if, you know, I'm doing something. And like, you know, they would say that, but you knew if you did, you were there was gonna be retribution towards you, right? And I think that we lead by example, and that's not the case. We don't spend time looking for who's at fault. It's like, this thing happened. What's the solution? It's like, let's focus on solution, because that's how we move forward. We don't move forward looking back and trying to point fingers. Yeah. And I think that's a very important part of, you know, our success and the leadership by example that we move forward or carry out in there that our people can see and learn from. Yeah. Right.
And that translates onto the job site. You know, we think this is funny, but I didn't realize the emotional component of building for people. how invested folks get both in their finances and their time and their heart in building, their dream home or adding on their dream addition. And like, it is a very passionate experience, and our team walks into people's homes and start making changes to it. And it doesn't always go perfectly, but that approach of wanting to get in and figure out what's right and wrong, and then drive everything towards that right together without just leaving behind the people who aren't doing it the way we want to, of like, no, let's figure it out together and all push forward towards what's right and best. Like, we're doing that on the job sites as well, not just in the office and relationships with each other, but like, that's the work that's being done with, the tools as well.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we work with, like, we're in clients' homes. We're around their kids. We're around husband, wife, partners, whatever the case may be. And we get stuck in the middle of some stuff, right? Like maybe this significant other wants it a certain way and this one doesn't, or this one's making decisions that are impacting budgets and this one doesn't know about it and they find out. And oftentimes we're stuck in the middle of that and having to navigate it. And it's can be, challenging at best, but it's also kind of fun. Right? Because, since I've worked with Paul, he's helped me to like get better at me, like outside of, construction knowledge, that sort of thing, but like me and how to interact with everybody and how to take a like kind of a softer approach. And it's been very useful, especially in those situations, right? Because it can be kind of uncomfortable when you're there in the middle of this sort of significant other fight that's going on, and you can't help but to feel part of it because, it's the work that you're doing or how you invoice them or something is part of that discussion, and you're kind of in the middle of it. And it's, we do a lot of that. Yeah. We do a lot of that.
But I love when a project wraps and the last thing I hear is we close the doors, we're going to miss you. And it's like, that to me is like the exclamation point on the end of what we do, because we miss them too. Like, we become very much a part of their fiber and they ours. And, we have a client that we're working with to do the lighting project right now. Like, everybody's excited that we're back at that house because they love that homeowner and, the faith that that homeowner took in our business in the early days. And they just like each other. Our team likes that person and that person likes our team. And I find a lot of reward in that, like the connection of when our team makes the connection with the homeowner and push through those uncomfortable moments, do the uncomfortable walkthroughs, do the uncomfortable in general, and then come out at the other side of it with like real relationships and real like companionship. That part's really fun for me.
Yeah, it's not uncommon in my experience to get to the end of the project and the client, gives me a big hug and says, "This is wonderful. Not that we want you to be here any longer right now because we're at the end of a 6 to 9 to 12 month process with them." But there is this real affinity that's grown over time. And it's really interesting for me to even just observe the conversation we're having right now. I imagine if people are tuning in for the first session of our podcast, they're like, you're halfway or more through the first podcast, and is this a construction podcast or is this a people podcast, right?
Right.
And you said it at one point, it's like this weird 60-30 or 60-40-70-30 kind of thing.
This is why I do the math.
That's right. I don't keep the books. But it leans toward the relationship side, and construction it's not an afterthought by any means, but it's there's very much people centered around this thing that we're doing for it to be successful.
It is for sure. I have said a few times, and I say it, will continue to say it, that we're a relationship company that happens to do construction, right? That's because like the relationship part is our core. And then we happen to do really incredible construction work, right? But, like when we talk with our project managers, when you hear them talk about, oh, well, at this project, this interaction happened and that sort of thing. And most of their conversations with us when they get back to the office aren't about construction.
That's right.
Details. It's about interactions with people. This sub had to pull off because they had an emergency. They didn't tell me. It was frustrating. Their office didn't call me. It was frustrating, right? or, somebody was supposed to have done something that didn't happen, or, the client vented on me. Obviously they were having a bad day, had nothing to do with what I was doing, but I was there to kind of console them. And that's what we hear about mostly, right? More so than we hear about, construction detail stuff.
That's right.
Which is, pretty telling.
Yeah.
It really is.
So it strikes me, though, that one thing we do talk about all the time, in addition to the relationships, though, which we also mention everywhere we go, is our process. We're always talking about our process. And I think that's because we recognize the inherent complexity of the things we're trying to pull off, whether that be relationally or in terms of integrating a new and an old structure, or if that's just working with the different people on the team. So a client, a design professional of some sort, and us, just managing all that requires us to have some really good practices in place to drive that thing. And that's something I know that you've really appreciated from where you came in your career at the beginning to where you are now, really thoughtful processes that govern this thing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, most of my career was managing chaos.
Mm-hmm.
That's what construction was. It was just like chaos. You did your best to wrangle it. And at the end of the job, people were content.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say happy. They didn't enjoy the process, but they were content. Like finally they got what it was that they were looking for. And it was a pretty painful, ugly mess. And all along, I'm like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And you would become good at managing chaos, and you could start to turn out, a smoother process and a happy client, but there's still pieces missing. That thing that was missing was like a structured process. And only through time and trial and error do you come up with that process. And I'm not going to say it's perfect, because we're constantly tweaking it as we need to, right? What thing out there is perfect always? It just wasn't. Like the hula hoop was this great thing, but since then there's been better stuff, right?
Wait, did you just say they redesigned the hula hoop?
No, I really didn't. That's probably not even a great. Okay, hold on. The phonograph that played the records, you had to hand crank, was a great thing at its time, and now we have streaming music.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the one.
Right. And then there's the whole cloud thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which apparently you say we're a cloud-based
Yeah, we're a cloud-based
organization.
company. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Where was I going with all this? Just the fact that, our process we think is incredible, and we have track record of it being incredible, but it's still constantly being tweaked.
Yeah.
As projects change, as the demographic of our clients change, as times change, as building codes change, as new products come into the marketplace, all those fun things happen. We have to constantly adapt to them with our process. And I think that that's another important piece of our process, is that it's rigid until it needs to not be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, we've worked at places, Paul and I have, where there was this rigid process that was to never flex. And that didn't work well. And it's the same thing that we run into when we work with, city jurisdictions or counties or whatever. They have this like rigid, code that's inflexible. It needs to apply to all things, but yet it depends comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Because the intent of the code is one thing, but when you apply it to all things, there's always stuff that doesn't quite fit into that. And there has to be that flexibility, and there isn't. And that's what's really frustrating.
Yeah.
And we have flexibility. That's good.
My question is, you've been in the construction industry the longest.
Because he's the oldest.
Oh,
And
right.
wisest.
Aren't you on HR? Is that a violation of some sort?
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Now it's
Yeah.
recorded.
Yeah.
We could put that out there.
So you're the oldest, and you've been on construction the longest. What are the parts of the process that we do now that feel the best, or like the biggest departure from the chaos you're describing?
So I would say we start with our pre-construction process.
Yeah.
The majority of my career, that didn't exist. Pre-construction was telling the client everything they wanted to hear, and getting the job and getting the signed contract, and then figuring it all out. Like in process, disaster. Like things just don't go well.
Schedules, budgets,
Everything.
all the things.
Everything just kind of happens in process, and it's just this big floppy, ugly mess. pre-COVID, you could get away with it to a degree because there wasn't these really long lead times. Now with really long lead times, you can't. You just can't. You have to pre-plan. So our pre-construction process is really great because we are figuring things out on paper before we ever get to construction.
Yes. Right.
And whether it's the constructability of the design or the existing systems within the house, if it's a renovation, what are the condition of those? Can they handle the work that we're doing? Is there enough room in the panel for the new circuitry that's going to be added? Yada, 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 yada. All that thing is happening while it's in paper form prior to construction. And that working those problems out ahead of time saves dollars during the construction process, as well as headache and time duration of the project build, right? Every month that a project extends out beyond what it really should take to do it costs somebody money. I would say that pre-construction piece is the biggest one. It helps us to do so much. And I oftentimes will say that it's kind of like a dress rehearsal for a wedding.
Yes.
Right? Like all the sub-trades show up there to the project, the design professionals there, the clients are welcome to be there. Sometimes they want to see who's, working on their project. They want to ask questions, all that fun stuff. So we encourage it, but sometimes they're busy and they don't want to be. Project managers there, I'm there, lead carpenters there, and we are all walking the job and understanding what it's going to take to pull this off and what things we may have to be concerned about.
Yes. Right.
All those things inform budget. When we put together a budget and present it to a client, we have the highest level of accuracy that we can know at that time. And does that mean that we get it perfect every time? No, because there's things that we just can't know. I mean, anybody that tells you that they can assure you that this is what it's going to cost is either adding a lot to the price to cover themselves, or they're being less than honest with you. We can't know. There's things we just can't know. But we do our best to try and think through the things that can happen and have our budgets reflect that. And we're pretty dang close. We're pretty good at being, accurate to what we can know.
Another element of the pre-construction process that I've come to appreciate a lot, and we'll find this out when we talk to an interior designer and an architect in our next couple of sessions, is that there are pieces that they don't understand about our process that if we're not involved during the pre-construction are bound to fall through the cracks or to be unexplored. So one of the things when we've been building relationships with the design world, especially hard over the last year, is that we found there's a real lack of transparency between their world and ours. So for example, they don't know, at the end of a project that we run with them, they don't ever get invited to see what the actual dollars, how they landed. And so they're designing in a vacuum to a degree because they don't know how much things cost at the other end. And by opening up a conversation with them during the pre-construction process and working through the feasibility study that you're talking about and opening forensically as necessary to find out existing conditions, they start to learn a lot about our process and can then do a better job on their design in the future. And that seems like a really critical element.
It definitely is. And also, us being along during the design process is very helpful. It really is. I mean, it helps us to help the design professional with the things that they just don't know or aren't sure about that we do. And rather than have something be designed that's too expensive or can't be built, and then have the homeowner fall in love with that, and then we come along and we're the bad news guy, right? The dream killer. And that's never fun. Right. So it's better to shape that dream ahead of time rather than have somebody fall in love with something that is either too expensive or just can't be done.
Yeah. And a lot, I think all the folks involved in the pre-construction process, the design team, us, the homeowner, we all want the project to happen. We want the thing to be built. And by partnering early on, we have a much higher rate of those projects actually getting built because we're working along all the steps to make sure that it's feasible. And that feasibility and knowing the feasibility as far up the timetable as possible, that benefits everybody along the way. And there's a lot less difficult conversations once people have hooked their heart on
building this thing that's on paper, because we've worked out those details.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we oftentimes get in a scenario where the design is this whole house renovation, let's say, and the budget's come in way higher than what people are comfortable with. And so then we phase it. And so instead of doing it all, we do maybe 50%. And then it's funny how we get through that, or near the end of that first 50%. And oftentimes people are trying to find ways to make it work to do the second one right away because they've enjoyed the process and they really enjoy our team, and they don't want it to end in some ways. And like, the new part looks so much better than the old part. But, I would much rather have a scenario where we're phasing work and people are paying what it really costs to do that work and do it well, and to just do less of it, rather than say, well, no, I really want to do this whole big thing and it really costs more than I can afford. So instead of listening to that and dialing it back, we're going to go out and find somebody that's willing to subsidize the difference, which is what's ultimately happening, is somebody's willing to work for less money, pay their people less, maybe not pay some people at all, to make that budget fit the amount of work that somebody wants to do. And that just doesn't feel good on any level. And ultimately, everybody loses in that. And the homeowner ultimately loses in that because the quality of work that they're getting is nowhere near what it is that they would have got if, they had hired the right people for the job.
And I suspect from you coming in from the outside, the length, the duration of the pre-construction life cycle is probably shocking. I just had a designer yesterday when I was talking, actually an architect I was talking to yesterday on the phone, who referred to it as glacial.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if we get this project coming in our door as the design professional now, in 18 months, it'll get to you.
Yeah, and I think that too is a reflection. I bet there are companies that get it done faster, but if you drilled into the projects they are doing, there is a complexity of projects we get stapled to. Like, there is a level of difficulty of materials that are very refined that require a special touch. Like, there is definitely a caliber of work that comes to us that is different and requires and demands that length of time and consideration in order to get to buildability.
Yeah.
Again,
Right.
that word. Is that even a real word?
It really
is.
is. And
Paul knows. Anybody's going to know it's
that's
Paul.
right.
Yeah.
Rivulet. Just throw that in there. So, yeah, and especially if we get into some of the other areas of interest that we have, which is like making buildings perform really well and last a long time, or be healthy in ways for people who have, let's say, chemical sensitivities or issues with mold. Then we really have to peel things all the way back to the beginning and start to conceptualize them so that, like Kevin said, the wall assembly for that location, for that client, does exactly what it needs to do. And there are not many people who are going to that depth, and we're interested in that. It's the curiosity that you're talking about that's inherent in all the people that we're wanting to work with. We're drawing those people out of the fabric of the whole building industry, and that's exactly what we want. That's what we're shooting for.
Yeah, for sure. Somebody asked me not long ago, they're like, so where do you go to college? And I'm like, I went to the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
And I graduated with honors, quite
I
honestly.
think you have your doctorate.
Yeah, I might even have that. But the real answer, though, is I didn't go to college. But I have spent probably thousands of continuing education hours, quite honestly, over my career, seeking out that knowledge, right? And once you know something, you can't unknow it. And you take all that information, you pair it together and apply it to situations. And so it's critical for me to know that the thing that we're putting out there and that we're having people live in isn't going to make them sick, to the best of our ability and knowledge at that time, right? If I look back at my career, I did some really silly things because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
But once you know it, you can't go backwards, or you can't look the other way. You have to do it better and better and better, and try and work out all of the badness that exists within our industry as much as we possibly can, even to where we source material and how that material's grown. Remember when we had the lunch and learn with the tribe that came in and talked about how they manage their forest?
Yes.
And it was so crazy because I remember thinking, like, years ago that a well-managed forest just, like, you didn't cut the big trees, you just cut the small ones, and that was really great. And then you come to find out that actually waiting a long time and cutting the big trees was really the better way to go, and that there's all these benefits that happen from the quality of material, which we knew about, but there's the benefits to the environment in which they're grown and the people that live around it and the watersheds, and how those mature trees, like, do a better job at converting CO2 to oxygen, and they use less water than a whole bunch of smaller trees, and like all these things, and habitats for animals and stuff. And so when you think about it, the simple choice of picking where to buy a 2x4 can have this like really long reaching effect. And we spent a lot of time knowing what those long reaching effects are and trying to do our best to minimize that and to maximize our dollars being spent in places where it's doing the maximum benefit, like long term for everybody.
Yep.
And that's a wonderful thing, I think.
Yeah. So what I heard you say all in that one stream is we're going to try to divorce ourselves from the bad things that the industry has done or we've done in our past. And we're going to try to move toward things that are better. And when you were saying some of those better things, I heard excitement for you about doing those better things. And that's one of the things we'd wanted to talk about in this episode, was just some of the things that excite us about what we're doing. Like that was one of them for you, is using better materials that are healthy for all the people involved, right?
Yeah, including the people that work with it,
Right.
the people that live with it, the people that transport it, and then where it's coming from. And, natural materials have always been in style, right? And there's a lot of talk about sustainability and all that stuff. And sustainability to me has a lot to do with the longevity that something's going to be used for, right? If we look at castles that are thousands of years old in Europe, like they're marble, they're stone, they're heavy timbered roofs, right? They're a very forgiving assembly, and they're just as in style today as they were then. Well, we can do those same things with how we build.
Yeah.
But it means that you're not maybe the most trendy guy. You're more of the classy guy.
Yeah. You like
Or
to be the
classic
classy guy.
Right. Classy and classic. Yeah. I do. Yeah. Guilty as charged.
One of the things that excites me about what we're doing is, like you said, I tend to love to not only dabble but dive into the world of relationships and people, and how to break down communication barriers between people and that sort of thing. And I feel like in the context of Opus Vitae and the way we're creating it, we get to do that all the time, and that's very exciting to me. To recognize the deficiencies that we see in the construction process as it's been done, which tends to lend itself to a lot of animosity between the build side, who like to point their finger at the design side, who like to point their finger back, and then a fracture opens between us. And I remember lots of conversations with you where we would say, like, we've got to figure out how to not do that anymore, how to not point the finger at the other person, but to learn that we are very observant to what we do well and not well. And when we don't do it well, how do we learn from our mistakes, acknowledge them in front of the others? We have lots of relationships in different directions, and how do we make it better? And so some of what I love to do in this industry, I could do in just about any industry. But there's some of it that's just lovely and specific to homes, because like you said, we're in people's sanctuary that they come home to after work. If they're living there while we're doing the work, it's probably not as much of a sanctuary anymore, but it's still their greatest investment and the place that they come home to lay their head at night and to rest from their work. So those are some of the things that I feel really excited about in the progression and development of our company, is just to watch those barriers break down and to see people like, oh, this is what good and trusting relationships look and feel like, and we can lean into that.
Yeah, I think I get most excited about our general approach to like the rising tides. Like we truly want everybody to come along with us. You talked a little bit about the lunch and learn that we had with the Cow Creek tribe and having Northwest Sustainable Woods into the office. And, that wasn't just for us. We didn't just invite our team. We include other people we've worked with, people we hope to work with,
Right.
people who are just interested in the same things we are. We invite our team, we pull them off of job sites to have them come in and learn, even if that pulls away from revenue. But we want all of us to rise together. How we our carpenters, how they advance through their careers, I think, from what I'm learning, looks different at Opus than it does at any other organization. It's deliberate. Like, we put a lot of intention and documentation and process behind it because we want to have them increase their skill set. We want for them to, if they ever leave, which they're not allowed, we want them to leave or take over.
Yeah.
We want them to take over and be the best that they
Yes.
can be, and not to have been stagnant in their career and just done one thing over and over again. We want them to learn other,
Be
skills
well-rounded.
and be well-rounded. And so I think that for me is probably what definitely gets me out of bed in the morning, is for all of us to rise together, for our successes to directly correlate to the success of the trades that we work with across the board, no matter what they're doing. If there's someone bringing us work, great, but we would treat exactly a different person the same way and educate them the best that we could. And vice versa, right? Learn from other.
That's right.
Like, I remember one of my first times going on a job site with you, the number of questions you asked, I was like, okay, we got to go. Like, please stop. But you had this desire to learn why the grout was the right grout for that tile. And then you put that in your bank. You shared it with our team at the next all-team meeting and talked about that. So it's definitely like this desire to just have everybody grow and mature and be wiser at whatever end it is for them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we put a lot into ongoing education for our team. We really do. And I think it's crucial to our success. I mean, at our company, we have 3 Passive House certified people.
That's right.
Yeah,
Out of not very many people.
right. Yeah. Well, a team of 9, right?
Yeah.
So that's what, 33.3%?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Huh,
That's
with
good
the
math.
Yeah.
That's the good math.
Exactly. So yeah, that's an important thing for us.
Yeah.
It just really is. And I think back to, there was some intelligent, smart person said the thing that, when asked, like, well, what if you train people and you put all this money into training them and they leave the company? And the response was, well, what if we don't train them and they stay? Right? That's the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah.
And I don't want any part of that. I want to train them, and hopefully they stay. But if they don't, then great. Then they're better for it.
Yeah.
Like when I first got into the industry, I was so thirsty to learn and succeed and be better, and there was not a lot out there to help that process.
It's true.
I had to self-teach and figure things out on my own and stuff. And I don't want that for our team. I want for our team to have access to all this information so that they can be better faster than I did.
Yep.
And that behooves us as well as them. And so it's like that, that like what is great for them is great for us, and vice versa. And that's a pretty neat thing to see happen.
Yeah, and that circles us back to kind of where we started in some ways, which is you got the young man, yelling, tongue lashing kind of thing, because that's what you did. And I came into the industry and got that a little bit also. And like, I don't really want that. And now what I hear our carpenters saying to our apprentice who just started is, let me explain to you why you're doing the thing that you're doing, because it will help you to have a context for it. And that is just a lovely circle that we're talking about here, where you and I both experienced something, and we're trying to inculcate that something different into the culture of what we're experiencing. And to hear our carpenters explaining to me why they were sharing the why, like, yes, that part of the work is done.
Yeah.
That feels so good.
It does. It's great. The other day, one of the carpenters called me. And he's like, hey, Kevin, I was thinking about something. He's like, how we put, like structural strapping on stuff? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, how come we don't put, like a peel and stick behind it, or the WRB, the weather resistive barrier behind it? He goes, because we do, like when we have metal flashings around windows and stuff. And I was like, stop. I go, first of all, I'm so excited that you're calling me to ask that, and that you're thinking critically, and that you're questioning stuff, right? Because that's the only way you move beyond the stagnation of what you're doing is by questioning it and saying, well, why? And well, if we're doing it here, shouldn't we do it there? And so we talked through all the scenarios and stuff. And ultimately I said, listen, we're a best practices only company. And if you see something that is even in question, like, I think we should do it this way, maybe it's like one chance in 1,000 that something could go wrong, but there's that one chance, do it the other way. And then we don't have to worry. And it was a beautiful thing for me to see the comfort level of him to just like, what could be conceived as like, oh, I'm calling the ownership, right? Like they dictate how things are done and we don't get to question it. It's just the exact opposite. Instead, we're always asking the people that are down there where the rubber meets the road, right? The carpenters in the field, how are things going? Give us feedback. That product that we specified, what are the downsides to it? Like talk to us in real time so that we can make adjustments to put out the best product possible, but also to work with products that make sense. And it was a full circle moment for me, and I was very proud to be part of that. Let's talk about the future for a moment. Christine, what do you see?
Why do you keep starting with me?
Okay, strike that. Paul, what do you see?
Why do you always start with me?
Strike that. Kevin, what do you see the future?
Well, that's a great question.
Thank you. Thank you,
for
Paul.
asking.
Yes, the future for me isn't a finite thing. It's more of just continuing on the path to get better and to do better and to figure out ways to make the things that we do not so ridiculously expensive. You know, it's like when you're out there doing things for the first time or you're working with materials that very few people work with, it's just inherently more expensive. And I hope that the things that we're doing become commonplace enough that will drive down the price and we can do it for more people. That's, I guess, my goal and kind of, what I see the future for us in a very like macro sense, like biggest of pictures. I don't really have a small focus on what I see the future for us because I think it's somewhat endless, to be honest with you.
I see a couple of things that are the most exciting to me. One of them is that we dream and think all the time about higher performing and healthier buildings, not only for person living there, for the environment and all of that, but something that can be more enjoyable environment for people who are living in that house. And not many people know to ask for the things that we know we can do, right?
Yep.
Wouldn't you say that's true?
Yep, that's
I would
absolutely
say
true.
The message that we are trying to give to the marketplace is that there's more that you can ask from your house, and we're just trying to figure out how to get that message out. And all the relationality that we have with everybody we can within our arm's reach, basically. We're trying to get that word out to the design teams, to owners, try to figure out how to get the message to owners directly. And I feel like by the time we're ready to hang it up and hand it off to someone else, we're going to have infiltrated that a little bit more. And people are going to start to know that they can ask for these things that we can provide for their houses. And that's a bit cryptic. There's a lot to that. I mean, it could be that people have sensitivities to chemicals or to mold, or they want a really quiet environment, or they want a house that's going to last 200 years, or, I mean, the list could go on and on. It just is so specific to people. And we're sitting over here sort of like waving our hand, like, hey, we can do that stuff. We're ready. We have the team. We have the understanding. It's a growing understanding at all times, but we have that. And that's something that I just want to keep leaning into, is trying to get that message out there to people so we have more opportunities for that sort of cool thing.
Have you considered doing like a naked bike ride to get the word out? Or?
We knew it was coming at some point. No, that's fine. You could be the advocate for that. I mean,
I'll get you guys a tandem. You can go together.
Oh, thank you.
So we just got to what my hope is for this company, that happened, and that I not be there to see it.
Oh.
But I will let Dana and Damaris know if they want to attend, because I suspect they would find some level of humor in it.
I think my hope, having a background as an HR person, I think, I think a lot like ourselves of wanting to have this company be where we exit, our careers from. I hope to see a shift within our team that people think that way too. That people come on and say, this is where I want to close out my career, whether it's aiming at, shares and ownership or, whatever the role that they aspire to within the organization. And that, construction is tricky for people as they age. Like I didn't know that. And, kind of this burning out of people's bodies through the trade that they chose to do. People have a knee problem and all of a sudden they can't get down and do the work that they did before. And, I think a lot of organizations exit them. They can't physically do the work anymore. And I think we desire to be different. And so, I greatly hope that as a part of our future that we're a place that has a place for people as they change what they desire to do, unless it's to leave construction. And then we'll help them do that. But, as their bodies change or as their desires change or as their understanding of what we do, like, we have a carpenter on our team who aspires to be a PM. It's an interesting choice, but we will help them drive towards a direction that makes sense for them in an effort to keep them. Because what they offer is so much more than just being a carpenter. They offer a lot of experience and wisdom, and retaining them and helping them grow within the organization when they are deciding that they're going to do something slightly different benefits everybody.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And the knowledge that they bring as what a carpenter looks like working for us versus what somebody else may look like. But having that knowledge in the project manager's position is very valuable for sure. So yeah, it definitely is like everybody wins in that scenario.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a wrap for.
Do we say goodbye?
I don't know.
Do we tell all of our followers?
We can say thank you for watching
Thank you,
episode
followers.
1 for the It's Our Life's Work podcast.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Thank you for joining us on our episode today. We had a lot of fun talking with our guests. We really enjoyed the conversation, and we'll be looking forward to you when our next content comes out.